Now, it looks like the PlayStation 5 might be getting a upgrade for the console, and it might not be the type of upgrade that you actually think it might be. So I'm actually very interested to talk about this video because as a fan of the PlayStation 5, I think that this might actually be something that makes things that much better, as well. I think the console itself is a brilliant console in and of itself. I do think obviously there could be some tweaks there that could be done that make it that much better. But I also think that at the end of the day, Sony created a pretty good console. But these consoles constantly get tweaked and little upgrades and things like that. If you look at the PlayStation 5 already, they've already changed some parts in it, done some little upgrades and things like that to make it easier to build, to make it more affordable for themselves, and that kind of process will continue to happen throughout the generation. And we'll probably see a slim at some point, right? I can imagine that they want to get a slimmer thing. I'm not sure if we're going to see that anytime super soon, but probably within, I would say, the next year and a half, we probably will hear something about a slim. I would expect the same thing to happen for Microsoft. Listen, what really interests me? If we ever see a slim Xbox Series S, I think that would be kind of crazy to think about, because that thing is already like the smallest thing ever. Like, it's as big as my hand. So yeah, it is a little bit funny, but yeah, listen, it's an exciting time for video games. I think, honestly, one of the things that might help us stick with not having like technical next gen upgrade or mid gen upgrades like last generation is the fact that we had a pandemic. And I also think probably both Sony and Microsoft were opportunistic when it came to 4K. A lot of people were upgrading to 4K. It was a big deal. Trust me when I say that. Now, the thing is, 8K is not a big deal, right? Like, I know some people are, honestly, is there anybody out there going, man, I can't wait to get my hands on 8K? Right? I don't think that's happening. So when we look at what's going on with PlayStation and we see these type of upgrades coming, that's something that I can get behind because I think it's pretty cool. But I also think at the same time, some people might be disappointed because it's not a full mid-gen refresh or anything like that. But again, we never got any kind of data or information on how many PS4 Pros sold or how many Xbox One X's sold. So I think we can kind of, take it for what it's worth that since nobody, even Sony, who liked to talk numbers, never responded to what numbers actually were, we can assume that they weren't the biggest sellers. I'm just going to say probably that PS4 Slim was the biggest seller, and the Xbox One S was definitely the biggest seller. In fact, to be honest with you, in all the times I've been to stores and things like that, I only ever saw a PS4 Pro one time, I think, right? And when my PS4 broke in 2020, it got fried. I couldn't find a new one in the store. You know what I mean? It took me a long time to track one down. It was kind of like my PSVR got fried at the same time because it was all hooked up. To find I couldn't find a new one. I had to get an open box one at like Best Buy or something. People go, oh, well, why didn't you just, get a new one or whatever? I couldn't get one. Luckily the insurance kind of paid for that stuff. But at the end of the day, I'm not sure. Like, I never saw an influx of those at stores anywhere. I saw plenty of PS4 Slims and plenty of Xbox One S's, but I rarely, if ever, saw a One X or a PS4 Pro. So this is going to be an interesting topic. I know a lot of people are kind of interested to talk about this. I want to take a minute to say thank you guys if you're watching the video, and I appreciate it. If you guys could just take the second out of your day to like the video as well, that would mean a lot to me, because you guys don't realize probably that your likes lead to the videos to being seen and the channel to grow. So I mean, honestly, it's such a thing. I want to do these videos and continue doing them even though my schedules are changing, but it really just requires you guys to help me out a little bit. That's all I really ask. So if you could like the video, thank you very much. Let's get into it. Like I said, this won't be a traditional mid-gen refresh by any means, but it does look like Sony is doing something to improve things, and it looks like they're going to be using some non-Newtonian fluid for smoother joystick operation in the futures, and this could be a big improvement over what we've seen in the past. As you know, there was also some people who filed complaints because of joystick drift with the DualSense, and now it looks like that could be something that is fixed as well. Now, the standard controller design for video game consoles has remained relatively unchanged since the introduction of the familiar D-pad and button layouts found in the Nintendo Entertainment System controller controller in 1983. Wow, that was a long time ago. Hard to believe, right? Wow, almost 40 years ago. Sheesh. The biggest advancements in controller design happened to be this time in the analog sticks in the 90s, which allowed for more fluid movements of both characters as well as cameras in a 3D environment. Although controller designs have remained fairly consistent since this time, console manufacturers are still working on improvements, which they hope will become the next industry standard. Recently, the PlayStation 5's DualSense controller was praised for its inclusion of haptic feedback in its triggers. Now, Sony is developing concepts which could see actually those controllers improve even more, and Sony's latest patent describes a new kind of analog stick which is able to retract into the body of the controller. There are also plans to include a non-Newtonian fluid which would be displaced by the collapsible analog stick. A non-Newtonian fluid is a liquid which hardens in response to sudden pressure, and this should provide these analog sticks with a kind of inbuilt haptic resistance similar to what the DualSense triggers actually offer currently. Now, the fluid in the stick would also likely help to reset the analog stick fairly quickly once the player lifts pressure from them. So it's very pressure sensitive and something that, gamers would probably get a lot out of. It's an interesting design choice according to this, which could introduce a range of new gameplay features for developers to implement. These collapsible control sticks could act like two extra analog trigger inputs on the face of the controller itself, with which the player could maintain fine control of the game's analog inputs. They could actually do camera controls for 3D games or almost universally map to the right analog stick as it is and add an extra dimension. To move the stick in, it would allow players to easily zoom or focus the camera to a specific element or the environment around them. So this is going to make things much easier, but it's also going to make things probably add a little bit more a level or dimension of immersion. So implementing collapsible controller sticks would be more than a design tweak for the DualSense. It already features buttons which are pressed by pushing on the controller's analog sticks, although these buttons are usually only utilized when a game runs out of face buttons to map its controls to. And then even then, it's something that's vital. It's usually not going to be mapped to that stick anyway. So if the design is implemented into a future version of the DualSense controller, it may not play well with older games which have inputs that are dependent on the fast click of an analog stick, such as a jump button in Souls games. So the hydraulic action of these control sticks may find regular use in many AAA games according to this, especially those that aren't exclusive to PlayStation consoles. But a specific game or developer could possibly make great use of the feature, such as a skateboarding game like the upcoming Skate 4, which is already built around specific movements of the analog stick itself. So yeah, Sony has always patented ideas. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is going to come to fruition, but what it does mean is that they're thinking about, continuing to make some changes and things like that. I feel like, when it comes to changes that these consoles make, it's really important to always continue to move forward and things like that. And that's what I love about it. Sony never stands still for very long. They always kind of move forward, and, that's a brilliant thing. You can't stand pat. Like, they could have, honestly, if you think about this, right, and maybe they would have got less flack for this, but Sony could have just kept with the DualSense 4, right? They could have just kept with that, named it the DualSense 5, right? We'll have to see. And, listen, I think that would have been smart because, remember, a lot of people complained because the DualSense isn't able to be used on the PlayStation 4. Although I'm not sure if PlayStation 4 games can be used. But anyway, people always are going to complain about something. And, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to kind of doing some research but always moving forward. And I like that about Sony. What they're doing is pretty interesting and pretty cool. At the end of the day, listen, I like what Microsoft did as well. I mean, they said, hey, it ain't broke, we ain't going to fix it. And I guess that's a way to think about things too. But with that being said, I'm going to link this. What do you guys think? Would you guys like to see a mid-gen controller update? Let me know. I think this is an interesting topic. If you guys do watch my video, please leave a like on it. It helps it to be seen and the channel to grow. Rack 'em up, fact 'em up, Crap Gamer 'em up. Thanks for watching. Crap Gamer out.